Imagine a place so ruthless that doctors are told to put aside their usual ethical concerns and help interrogators torture prisoners without actually killing them. An environment so brutal that humans are subjected to sensory deprivation on a regular basis. The whole time you know your stay is indefinite, even if you've not been charged or convicted, and you fear you might have to stay there forever. And worst of all, you have to wear an orange jumpsuit all day. But, oh wait, it's sunrise. Time to rise and shine. This is no place for chit-chat. We're in Guantanamo Bay. After feeling badly rested from a terrible night's sleep, it's time to start the day. And consider yourself lucky if you got any shut-eye at all. Guantanamo Bay officers often deprive prisoners of sleep at night thanks to guards under strict orders to make as much noise as possible by slamming doors and stomping noisily around. Well, nobody likes a night shift after all. Then at 8 a.m. you hear the distant sound of the military broadcasting the national anthem to their officers. It's time for another day of misery to begin. You're sitting alone in a cell with a heavy steel door, a corrugated metal roof, and a concrete floor. The place is tiny. It's 2.4 meters wide at its longest part and 1.8 meters at its smallest, and the walls are made of wires. In your cell with you, there are a few bare necessities. Your bed consists of a sleeping mat, but that's not even 1 inch thick, and a cheap blanket. You have 2 buckets for your waste, but hey, it's better than 1 bucket. There's 1 bath towel, a washcloth, toothpaste, soap, and shampoo. You've been provided with a few luxuries like a skull cap, prayer beads, the Quran, a prayer rug, but very little else. Still count yourself lucky. Sometimes you might be handcuffed, blindfolded, or masked for hours on end, and last night was plain sailing. This isn't a scene from a dystopian film, something that happened 50 years ago, or even a prison from a country we expect to do barbaric things like maybe North Korea. In fact, this is happening in a prison owned by none other than the United States of America. Almost everyone has heard of Guantanamo Bay, and most of us have already formed some kind of opinion about it. Maybe you believe it's a hypocritical human rights abuse, or perhaps you think it's a necessary evil to keep the rest of the world safe. Yet, true reliable information about the prison, colloquially known as Gitmo, is few and far between. Journalists and photographers face serious restrictions over the photos they can take and release out of fear the images could violate secrecy or privacy. Slightly convenient. And the only way you can go and see for yourself is by obtaining permission from the military base commander. Most of the people who make the complicated trip are base workers or families of those stationed there. Journalists are rarely allowed inside. When you think of Cuba, you might think of salsa dancing, idyllic beaches, or Havana, ooh-na-na, but you might be wondering how they ended up with some of the world's most dangerous detainees in one of its toughest prisons. Guantanamo Bay has actually been a U.S. military base since 1898. It was the year of the Spanish-American War, and a U.S. fleet was heading elsewhere to attack when it ended up stopping in Guantanamo for protection against the wind. Well, they must have kinda grew fond of the place because they persuaded Cuba to rent it to them and then basically just never left. Kinda like that guy sleeping on my couch. Except he isn't even paying me rent, the little… But anyway. Guantanamo Bay's prison part of the base was opened in January 2002 by President Bush. Most of the prisoners detained there were unlawful combatants from the Afghanistan War or involved in a certain incident from 2001 involving 2 towers. But enough of the history lesson, it's time for breakfast. You must be hungry after a sleepless night. Oh, no, wait, you can't actually eat, you're on a hunger strike. It's tough going since you can't even fill yourself up with water. The liquid that comes out of the tap is a suspicious yellow color, but it's part of a protest against the poor conditions in the prison and the fact that they've still not given you a trial in 10 years. If you did want to eat, the breakfast menu would be bread, cream cheese, an orange, a pastry, and a roll. But for you, it's a choice between liquid nutritional supplements and force feeding. Prisoners who refuse to eat food are first offered drinks filled with their essential nutrients and often shut in their rooms with the stuff until they feel pressured into drinking it. If you refuse too, military medical teams who flew out especially for the job will strap you to a restraint chair and shove tubes up your nose and down your stomach. It's a painful process that causes a gagging sensation as the liquid travels up your nose. There have been various hunger strikes throughout the history of Guantanamo Bay, but the largest and best known took place in 2013, with more than half the prison population taking part at its height. Exactly what happened after is unknown, as the government stopped releasing official figures. A hunger strike might not sound like the worst of crimes, but it's a strong form of rebellion that complicates everything. The people running the place must have been seriously stressed out, so they did all they could to discourage prisoners from not eating. Many detainees had their most basic necessities taken away as a punishment for resisting food, including blankets, shoes, and even medical equipment. Some were left sleeping on cold, hard concrete. Sometimes food would be left in an inmate's cell all day to force them to smell it, knowing they hadn't eaten in months. We don't know much about what's happening in Guantanamo now, or if there are still any hunger strikes going on. All we know is that most prisoners are in buildings called Camps 5 and 6. There are communal spaces for well-behaved general population prisoners here, with perks like the chance to watch a select few TV channels. It doesn't sound that terrible, so far. But there's also a top-secret Camp 7 for high-value detainees, and no outsiders are allowed in. Nothing dodgy going on in there then. Judging by the past, it might not be a pretty sight. Guantanamo Bay used to contain somewhere called Camp X-Ray, where prisoners were kept in 8-foot-tall cages fenced in by barbed wire. Clearly, in many ways, Guantanamo Bay remains shrouded in mystery. Well, breakfast time's over, so what's next? If it's a quiet day, breakfast is followed by the chance to have a shower. Just don't drop the soap, Never mind. There's been some time for personal activities like praying, thinking, and trying to get some sleep before a quick visit from the doctor. It might seem excessive to see a doctor every day, but I guess when you're living in life-threatening conditions, it's kind of understandable. If you're not on a hunger strike, then you can enjoy a delicious lunch dish like cereal accompanied with, cereal bars. Then more time to enjoy some more praying, thinking, and trying to get sleep. And you might even get the chance to exercise for a couple of hours or go outside. Your evening meal consists of white rice, beans, a banana, and bread. Then you've got a full night of, you guessed it, thinking, praying, and trying to get sleep. You might be thinking, oh hey, that doesn't sound so bad. But remember, you've had no food and no sleep. Plus, you could be subjected to arbitrary beatings at any point, making existing injuries worse. And every time prisoners need to move, they're clamped to irons on a trolley. And if it's not a quiet day, oh boy, you might want to stop and have a long, hard think about whether you really want to know the answer to that question. Just around the corner from prison life are the 1,000-odd military personnel stationed at the military base. Life isn't exactly sunshine and rainbows for them either, thanks to a daily routine that might involve heavy abuse or having prisoners throw literal feces at them as they walk by, then going to see a doctor to check that they haven't caught any diseases from the human liquids before continuing with their day. However, they do have more amenities available to them. Officers get stationed at Guantanamo for 9 months at a time, often without their families, and have to try to go about their lives as normal. Believe it or not, the base boasts a McDonald's, a Pizza Hut, and a Subway, a Taco Bell, and a Starbucks. Jamaicans and Filipinos make up the bulk of the service workers there. As well as fast food outlets, there are bars and water sports to take advantage of in the beautiful surroundings. Many officers go water skiing or sailing on their days off. But no McDonald's or water skiing for you, inmate. If it's a bad day, you might just get wheeled off to an interrogation hut. Enhanced interrogation is the name that authorities give to procedures designed to extract information from prisoners that totally weren't anything like torture. This not torture regime often involved doctors monitoring the vital signs of prisoners to make sure they weren't accidentally killed. I can tell you're just dying to know exactly what happened to the inmates while they were being tortured. Sorry, I mean interrogated through enhanced means. In vivid detail, and I wouldn't want to let you down. The main techniques used were based on the idea that if prisoners were made to feel completely helpless, they'd stop resisting and give away secret information. For instance, sensory deprivation was often used. Because there's no concrete evidence of these techniques causing significant psychological harm, lawyers concluded it was legal. But it wasn't just mental techniques that were used in the end. There's a forcible extraction team that work at Guantanamo whose responsibilities include beating detainees, often for no reason at all. They'd slam inmates into walls, frequently leading to medical problems. Prisoners also have to wear shackles every day, which causes swelling in the ankles. Another common procedure was water dousing, which involved being placed on a plastic tarp with your hands shackled above your head, as buckets of ice-cold water are poured on top and around you until you choke and feel a drowning sensation. Sometimes, officers locked prisoners into tiny boxes or kept them shackled in painful positions. One prisoner was even hung from an iron shackle until all the blood rushed into his feet and his hand was about to be cut off. Humiliation would be used against the detainees too, with techniques like forced nudity, aggressive naked searches, or being made to wear diapers. One prisoner urinated on the floor during an interrogation and was dragged through his urine like a human mop. As a result of the techniques used, many prisoners who survived and got away from Gitmo ended up with similar symptoms to prisoners of war captured by some of the most brutal regimes in history, including illnesses like PTSD, paranoia, depression, and psychosis. There are only 40 prisoners in Guantanamo Bay now, and many people are campaigning for the government to close it altogether due to its controversial history. But it's not quite that simple. Obama tried to shut the prison down as soon as he was elected, but he faced one tiny problem. There was nowhere for the detainees to go. Congress made sure it was illegal for anyone held as a detainee in Guantanamo to be transferred to the US, even for a trial, detention, or medical care. This is how many people ended up as so-called forever prisoners who never face a charge or conviction. If you're lucky enough to be convicted of a war crime, you might finally be sent back to your own country. But many nations don't want to take prisoners convicted of some of the worst crimes in the world, so some prisoners end up being repatriated to another, similarly murky prison elsewhere in the world. On the bright side, Guantanamo Bay might not be as bad as its reputation these days. Some recent visitors to the prison claim the American government has overcompensated for past scandals by giving current inmates far better treatment than those detained in mainland USA. Yet there's also some evidence that officers continue to use sleep deprivation techniques, so who knows? The only way to find out for sure is to go see for yourself. Just don't send me to find out. Sounds like a job for our local Infographics challenge guy. If your curiosity has been piqued by this topic, maybe you'd be interested in watching our other video about why nobody can escape from Guantanamo Bay, or the differences between US and Swedish prisons. We know you're gonna like them both, but choose one and go watch it now.